All right, the regular Q&A format a little bit boring, so we're going to get creative here and welcome inside our podcast. I'm Zack Bayrouty, and I'm joined by Pacific Athletic Director Adam Tschuor. The Roar with Shore is what I believe this is going to be
Oh boy.
called, or Roar More with Shore.
Okay. Yeah, that's cute. I like.
Dr.
Yeah.
This is a kind of a Dr. Seuss exercise,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Roar More with
Yeah, my
Shore.
kids will like that.
You were a golfer, right? Four.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
Gosh, I said that a lot in my career.
I have a hard time believing that. I feel like you're a pretty good golfer.
Good short game, but I could spray it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, no, it's but no, I like it. I think it's catchy.
Okay.
It's catchy. We want catchy.
We'll stick with that, but we want to kind of jazz up just a normal Q&A and talk with Adam here about all things Pacific athletics, and I want to make sure that we lead with men's basketball here, because this is one of the best starts we've had in the men's basketball season in quite some time. Unfortunately, coming up just short of getting that fifth straight win at Cal, but I mean, a valiant effort, and I was talking to, we'll start here. I was talking to Dave after the game, to Coach Smart in the post game. And I said, Coach, you took over this program, and the expectations were like down here. I mean, it was, you know how it was.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a great testament to the building of the culture that, Pacific was able to hang in there, not just in the Cal game when they were down by 14 in the first half, but you go back to the Nevada game, and then they were down by 10, I think, and it looked like that was going to get away. And yet you have a team that comes together, hangs in there, and they seem to have bought into a culture and a way of doing things. That's a credit to Dave and his staff. But can you get on board with that sentiment as far as men's basketball, just as a starting point here?
Yeah, and it's a tough nut to crack, because a lot of the stuff that you're mentioning here, with culture and chemistry and buying into things, it's almost an anachronism in today's world, because guys just kind of go from one place to the next chasing a dollar, and are they really buying into things? And certainly this is not foreign to us. We play in that world, but I've spoken before, like, last year, was just like, we're just trying to survive. Staff didn't get fully assembled until the portal was a month old, and we just try to find what we can to piece together. We didn't have many resources, have many more resources, but also much more time to go, not just get, there were certainly, I think we have a very talented group, but there were more talented guys that we looked at, but the guys that just were not going to fit. And, it's still rolling the dice a little bit, because you need to know whether or not these guys will gel together or not, and you just don't know until they actually get experience with one another. But, I think, it was an intentionally assembled roster of guys that checked, a lot of criteria that Dave and the staff were looking for. They had the resources to go get those right guys. But at the same time, in the months, and a lot of these guys, as they're getting to know each other more and more, they keep gelling more and more. And obviously there's opportunity for, fractious things to happen. I've seen plenty of it in my career, but, so far so good with
a great starting point.
Yeah,
I mean, a great starting point. And, it's funny, the landscape of college athletics is changing, and this is a conversation for another time, because you can go on and on about it. But, the MTEs are kind of becoming a thing of the past, which is unfortunate. Yeah. And I think the case in point, for it being unfortunate, is what Pacific was able to do in Daytona. I thought that was I thought the schedule was built really well for what was coming. And I thought that the Daytona MTE was perfect, because you had teams that were, Stony Brook's no pushover. I mean, that's a pretty good barometer. The team played really well against Jacksonville. You had the game against FAU, which was kind of part of that. But I think more importantly, we're in Florida for about a week, and I'm able to watch these guys kind of come together and eat together and practice together. And I think that builds just a little something, and these MTEs allowed for that, especially for the mid-major schools. What's your take on the MTE thing that's happening, and will Pacific participate, you think, in any more MTEs down the road, despite where the trend is heading?
Yeah, and you hate it because, I mean, again, the Players Era Festival, for what it's worth, which I find to be just, I do not find it to be exciting TV.
No.
Like, I mean, I watch the games, they're sterile, they're corporate, they're There's no excitement to
It's
them.
a means to an end.
Yeah, and at the same time, and again, I love Vegas. It's a home for us for our WCC tournament, but it's not a good time for them from a tourism standpoint.
Right.
It's a tough place to go to. It's just, but the down trickle effect. Now they're talking about going to 32 teams next year, and it's even going to have a more, not just as a guy who's worked in the business, but as a fan. Like some of my best experiences were at MTs. Maui Invitational.
You guys were in the Maui, right, with Dayton?
Orlando, Charleston, Puerto Rico, great, time. And again, we had a good time. So I love those tournaments for the fans. I love it for the bonding and the camaraderie of the guys. I love it because it challenges you in consecutive days. Like, hey, go, go, go. Like, we got to play some basketball here, which is the thing that some of these overpaid coaches in Power 4 schools are complaining about. Like, oh, why should we have to play back-to-back days?
It's always the way it was, right?
Yeah, and it binds your team that much closely together. And guess what? The same kind of way that you're going to be expected to compete and perform in the postseason. So they'll still exist, but I do think you're starting to see some corollaries right now of what's going to happen to our preseason events to what you're seeing in postseason events in college football right now. I mean, the bowls are going to... you're starting to see, I think it's like a dozen schools that have said no to their bowl bids.
Yeah.
And that's going to have a down trickle effect, and those bowls are going to die. And yeah, you're going to see some MTEs die. But no, we're still talking to, a lot of the players in the space. In my Dayton years, I got to know all the, Kemper Lesnick and ESPN Events and Gazelle Group and BDG and, all the different entities that run Intersport, that run these events. And we've had some, I think we're going to try to take advantage of some of the fluctuation. There's been some that have reached out to us if we want to partner with them directly to build an MTE around what we might want and then build a field around that. So us getting to pick the location, maybe we want to do something in like Tahoe. Okay, Tahoe in November, a basketball tournament. That'd be pretty fun, something like that. So, we'll still have that as a component, but and also too, because I have some of those relationships. Maybe the expansion players era leads to, and the continued rise and success of our program might lead to a Maui invite. Or something,
It's not out of bounds, especially the way things are right now.
Absolutely not. So, but no, there's been some other ones, the traditional ones, Paradise Jam and the Virgin Islands, a couple of them have already reached out. So, no, it'll still be a component. And you hit the nail on the head. It's what it does for your team. The programmatic benefits. That's really what it is.
I've been doing this a long time now. It's 16th year for me. So I've seen a lot. And I kind of got to know over time what has made this program tick. I go back to the Bob Thomason years, and because it is harder to win at Pacific, just given the circumstances, right? It's a smaller school. It's not right next to a major airport, although it's not far away. Academically, it is challenging, and back in the day, it was very stringent. Who they let into school. But Bob had a way of out X's and O's coaches, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Like Bob was a master tactician.
Yeah.
And that was his secret sauce. That was his little something. I mean, Damon was really tough. You go to the Stoudemire years, and he had the cachet, obviously. I want to get to your origin story with Dave Smart, because I feel like he brings a little something to the table, a lot of something, but a little something in terms of he's a little different. Like, he's Canadian. He has won a ton of games. Obviously, there's a winning pedigree there. He also has a great pipeline to a lot of young Canadian talent. Which maybe, that area of talent has not been harvested as much by the major power schools. But Dave has certainly access to a lot of those younger athletes, the Jayon Pitts of the world, who had maybe an NBA ceiling. Tell us about your origin story with Dave. What captured your interest as far as Dave is concerned, and how did it go down with getting Dave eventually to Pacific?
Yeah, everybody assumes I just knew Dave.
And I thought it was a shrewd hire at the time. I'm like, man, you had to have an out-of-the-box kind of thing, and you seem to have nailed it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And, obviously you've gotten to know, Dave, too, on the road, just as much as I have. Being around the program, and a lot of people just assumed, and I think our first time we chatted about that, you were like, oh, you just must have known Dave from a prior stop, or we had played against him. None. I never had any experience with him, other than reputationally and seeing what he was able to accomplish. And I go back to, it was about probably 2014 when I was at Dayton, and we were always very aggressive at UD of keeping a pulse on the business of college basketball and hiring in coaches and who might be on our radar in the future if we ever found ourselves in a position where we had to do a search. And that was one that I didn't even know back then that youth sports was even like a thing. Like there was a Canadian NCAA or a variety over there. But that year we played a youth sports team in basketball as a preseason exhibition, Ryerson. And it was a kind of a nothing burger of a game in the sense of like we won by like 50, and it was roughly equivalent to Division III men's basketball in my opinion in terms of talent and ability. And I think most people in the sports world would agree with that sentiment. And at that same time, I'm tracking what's going on around basketball. That's when Wichita State was rolling with Greg Marshall. I think that was around their 40-0 year around that time. Mick Cronin was doing good things at Cincinnati, some of his Sweet 16 teams. And then here comes this U Sports team, Carleton, coming down to the States and beats Wichita, beats Baylor, beats Cincinnati. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Like, who is this guy? So it got me curious, and, for schools, even at Dayton, which is a very well-resourced program, it's tough to go up against money. And we're seeing it now more than ever in the world of having to find additional means to compensate for a new tranche and what you have to pay, and that's the athletes. And so, you're always trying to look for that edge. And, you look to St. Mary's, right? They've found that kind of edge, and it doesn't always have to be your thing, but they use that kind of New Zealand, Australia pipeline to get their team to have a competitive leg up on the rest of the conference and kind of push up against Gonzaga. And then now they've gotten up reputationally. They still go to that, but they don't have to rely on it anymore because they have that competitive reputation.
Guys want to go there.
Yeah, they just want to go there. So, so I think that, kind of was a little bit of the idea. But I had stayed on Dave in terms of the progression of his career, and he retired, unretired, was doing this, was doing that. And just so happened, after I ended up at Pacific and after my first year here when I was looking at doing a search, he had that year gotten back into the game of college basketball, but this time in the States at Texas Tech. And again, just speaks to Grant McCaslin, has a tremendous reputation of being one of the in terms of basketball IQ, like he's about as up there as it gets. And so not surprising that he's going around and trying to find bits and pieces to build out his staff that just have that reputational advantage of just being uber smart in the space. And so it was one where I was like, okay, well, maybe this is something I need to consider. And then as we got the search going, you start putting the feelers out, and it's like, okay, well, maybe he's not interested in being a head coach anymore. Been there, done that. He had a pretty successful camp series and lecture series as because of his basketball knowledge and experience. He was doing stuff with the Ottawa Senators for a time, and he just had a lot of different things going on, and didn't even think it would maybe be even something that would occur to him to be interested in. And sure enough, connected with his people, and they were like, yeah, actually he would love to have a conversation. And next thing you know, it was he was in the residence with me and President Callahan having breakfast not too long after that initial conversation. And we had some great quality candidates in that role, but I think he just differentiated himself so much, not just with his knowledge, but in a limited amount of time that he was able to learn about us, he had a pretty cogent plan on how he wanted to attack making this a successful winning program.
How'd you sell him on the program? On the school?
I think it was, it's certainly something, I needed to convince him of the viability of, can we compete and can we win? So I needed to show him that, hey, this is what we have right now. This is what I arrived with, and this is what I need to know what you see your 2, 3, 4 are going to look like, but this is what your 2, 3, and 4 is going to look like from my seat. And I think if you were to ask him directly, I think he'd say, like, in terms of the picture I painted for him in terms of resources, it was pretty much on par with what he was expecting in year one. I feel like we probably over delivered. I'm ahead of the game a little bit in terms of what he was expecting in year two, and I think you're seeing some of that, on the court. But This is where we got to start winning, getting those 4 or 5 game win streaks going, getting people back in the building and back supporting the program. That I think that we're starting to see that with some money, but we're seeing from some people. But I think there's a lot of things. I think the region really interested in him in terms of the quality of life that you have. And
he always talks about it. He loves these. The weather in Stockton is like the best, which it is.
And you can go do any. I mean, the boys are loving it. Seemingly, it's hard to read. Kids of that age, Gabe and Theo, but they seem to be having a great time. And I've been to Lubbock a few times. I like Lubbock. It's not for everybody.
Yeah, West Texas is West Texas. It's out there.
Yes, it can be tough, and I like hey, Landman's a great series. I enjoy watching it, but it can be So I think the juxtaposition of NorCal and hey, go to Yosemite for a weekend, and Tahoe and the Bay Area, and not Napa and Sonoma. Like there's just a lot to do, and it's a lot of fun. And climate-wise, it's the most idyllic climate I think I've ever seen in my life, year round. And so, so that was certainly a part of it. The quality of our league, getting to go and compete with a lot of like schools, competitive schools,
good coaches.
He knew a lot of people, and that was the one thing too. Like he has a lot of relationships in the basketball world, and people in the basketball world really sold him on the quality of WCC basketball. And this is a great league to be in. So like someone like a Steve Nash, who's a Santa Clara guy, but someone he knows really well from Canada basketball, and obviously a big supporter there. And I was like, no, this is a great league. This is a great spot. It's a great part of the country. I love my experience at Santa Clara. Santa Clara and us are, as you know, are very similar, and we actually have we share a lot of donors, and we fish in the same ponds and a lot of things. And so, so I feel he felt really comfortable. And, as he's a very smart, highbrow, high functioning individual.
Yes.
He doesn't make any decisions lightly. He, if anything, he maybe overthinks on something.
He measures 10 times and cuts once.
Yes. And so I think he certainly did a lot of diligence on it. And we did that diligence on him too. And I think he was really appreciative. And if you ask him, he's told me this, and I've heard him say it with you and other people before, that, not trying to hype, me and President Callahan up, but he came away meeting with us feeling like we were genuine and earnest in what we told him we were going to provide and support the program with. And so we need to keep doing that. We need to keep pushing the needle and trying to grow things. And we can talk a little bit about it, but the other part is we're all still trying to figure our way out in this world.
Yeah.
Every month there's something new. Some new shoes dropping on new rule, new expectation. Now you got the CSC and the schools trying to add $2.5 million to the $20.5 million cap, because guess what? They figured out they must not have calculators at that level, because they put out their little rosy headlines to not appear so crass on football, like, oh, we're adding 150 new scholarships for all of our sports, and then they give all their money to football, and then guess what happens, right? Their basketball coaches start complaining like, hey, there's all these schools that aren't in the Power 4 that are outspending us, and they're beating us out on recruits. Like, we need more money. So guess what? Now they're trying to move the goalposts on us again and add more money to the cap, and it's infuriating. But it's so I keep even everything I promised Dave, I got to keep doing more too, because nuttiness.
So this is last one with basketball. There are a couple other things we want to talk about here, but you've been very vocal on social media elsewhere about
probably too vocal.
No, I love it. I think it's refreshing. I think that college athletics needs more adults in the room, frankly. But you've also been ahead of the curve as far as where this is all going. The money now required, yada yada yada. Dave gives you a unique kind of niche, and we talked about it a little bit in that he has this Canadian pipeline. How much of that was a factor for you in bringing in Dave? And were you aware that maybe you'd have this wonderful influx of talent from Canada that otherwise you might not have had access to?
And I've always had a lot of respect for Canadian ball players. I think it's one where if you look 10, 15 years ago, if you look at like a FIBA order of finish, it was maybe scratching top 10, 11, 12, maybe 9th in the order of finish. I mean, certainly wasn't competing with Serbia and Australia and Brazil or Spain or countries like that. And the last you look at the last 5 years, they're top 5 I mean, the growth of Canada basketball, and we had a number of Canadian basketball players come through Dayton while I was there, and they were just great. I mean, they were just really, and I think it's more respect I think I have for their youth system that they have here. Our youth system is broken in the United States. I mean, our grassroots basketball is awful in terms of what they promote and try to. I mean, you go to watch a bunch of 10-year-olds and they're running a 1-3-1 zone, and you're just like, what are you guys doing? You're not even teaching basic skills, because you got some guy who has no idea what he's doing, who is obsessed with winning, and that's all he cares about. He doesn't care about developing kids, and they get them focused.
At the end of the day, it's all about the money.
And it's you just run into a lot of issues, and now that we are paying them, and they all have agents, and it's just become really, I think they still teach sports to youth in a very holistic way in the Great North, from what I've been able to garner. And, so the quality of the young men and women that I see, because, I mean, we had Canadians in other sports too. I mean, so it's, that I think was a big piece for me, the growth of the basketball, the quality of the way they develop kids. And again, just trying to get that little niche carved out for us to where, I mean, you mentioned Jayon. I mean, he has a really high ceiling. He's going to be really, really good. And he's going to be a priority for us, I think in a big way. But, he's playing in Hoop Summit. McDonald's All-American and Hoop Summit.
Yeah.
It's like right there. We never had a Hoop Summit kid commit to Pacific before. And why was Jayon interested in us? Because he had aspirations to play for his national team. Well, guess what? Dave's the U23 head coach. Charles on our staff is an assistant on the U19 team, and if you want to play on the Olympic team for Team Canada, you got to work your way up through the system. And so, I think that's all. It was definitely a kernel for me that was like, okay, this is one of the fastest growing countries in terms of basketball talent. I mean, look at the NBA right now too. I mean, it's just full of Canadians.
Yeah, SGA.
Yep. So it's so that was definitely a factor. And you know what? I'm not saying my American athletes get into trouble or anything. They're good kids and keep their noses clean. But I mean, it'd be a rare day for one of our Canadians to end up in my inbox in a bad way.
That is very factual.
So they give me a little bit more peace of mind at night, I'd say.
Amen. We go on about basketball, and we'll revisit, in coming episodes, but new sports being added. You have stunt. Men's volleyball is a throwback. I used to do PA for men's volleyball back in the day. Yeah, that was one of the first jobs I ever had at Pacific. Shout out to Joe Wortman and that men's volleyball program. But kind of cool that men's volleyball is coming back, and then tell us a little bit about that and stunts.
That was, kind of fits into the plan. I've talked about it before when we added men's cross country, men's track and field last year. It brought back our kind of fledgling diving discipline and field disciplines in women's track and field of, hey, roster caps are a problem for us. I knew I needed to opt in, but, losing, 30 plus athletes because of the roster caps to opt into the house settlement at a time where colleges are going to continue to struggle. By 2035, 1 million less 18-year-olds for colleges to choose from. Too many schools, not enough kids.
It's crazy.
And so not exactly a great time for me to say, oh, by the way, I need more money in my budget, but also at the same time, I'm gonna draw money away from campus in net tuition revenue by saying goodbye to 33 kids. So how am I going to opt in and take advantage of these new benefits, while at the same time not being a drain on campus? And the only solution was adding sports. But we had to add the right sports. I know there's a lot of people out there. I still get a lot. Football, field hockey, a lot of lacrosse people reached out. Great sports. I'd have 100 sports if I could. But the overhead in those sports is tremendous. Yep. And when you start doing the math in terms of what we were able to work with campus, in terms of what I can share in with those incoming dollars, they were a net loss, not just for athletics but for the university. And so there are a lot of sports that just wouldn't make sense, but we were able to zero in on a number of sports that did make sense financially. And so certainly the sports we just added, and they're doing great, and they're actually uber competitive right off the bat. But one of those sports was men's volleyball, and it was, you hate it. For me, I hated it because, when I came here, I'm like, oh man, they got rid of the sport. I grew up with men's volleyball. I grew up in Muncie, Indiana, where Ball State is. They've always had a men's volleyball program there. I grew up going to those games. And I know the quality of those young men. In fact, at Ball State, there was an architecture program there, one of the best architecture schools in the country, actually. They actually wouldn't take athletes because it is a very rigorous program. It's just too much time. Except they'll take men's volleyball players. They
Really?
will take men's volleyball players.
Interesting.
But if you look back, and I've heard this from guys, you might remember this from your involvement. I guess they were all of our guys were all engineers.
Yeah.
And they were all really good students.
All really smart.
And this isn't to like point at prior administrations here, but when they were looking at some stuff budgetarily, they just didn't look at the full equation when they looked at men's volleyball and the desire to cut it. They were really off base on what they felt those young men would do. Oh, that's men's volleyball. It's not like basketball. There's no future in the sport. They're going to stay because they love Pacific. And I think they all did love Pacific, but within the context of their sports.
Sure.
And without it, they just assumed all those guys would say, well, they didn't. 18 of the 20 left. And so, yeah, when you factor in the net tuition, it was a tremendous loss for the university.
Well, they still wanted to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And 2 of them went to championship programs.
And it was a good program.
Yeah,
Joe did a great job with that back in the day.
So, we had a great partner in USA Volleyball. They have a lot of great donors right now around volleyball in anticipation of LA 28, that want to see beach, both on the men's and women's side, indoor women's side and the men's side, be really competitive in the Olympics, considering we're hosting.
Yeah.
And so why is America so competitive on the global stage? It's our unique American system of college sports that develops athletes. And so they know if we're going to be competitive, especially in some of these Eastern European countries that are uber competitive in men's volleyball, we need more college programs. And so they started investing through their foundation.
That's interesting.
Into colleges. And, they had added at Maryland Eastern Shore, added at Northern Kentucky, and then Grand Canyon came around and cut their program. And it's like, whoa, what the heck? Why are we cutting programs now? And it did sort of send them into kind of overdrive in terms of like, hey, we need to keep adding programs. Got connected through them, through some donor circles, and great partner, really has helped us get this thing off the ground. We should have a coach soon. And stunt that's something I'm going to have to educate a lot of people on. We're going to hopefully maybe talk about this more at some other time, but it's basically cheerleading. But it's the kind of cheerleading that you might have seen on ESPN,
competitive,
UCA. Yes, think of a mix of like, what you'd see stunting, right? Bases and pliers on a sideline at a game or a football game or a basketball game, but mixed with the kind of judging that you would see in gymnastics with a floor routine, or synchronized swimming or something like that, acro tumbling. It is a very competitive, very athletic sport with a huge roster, 65 kids.
That's wild.
I mean, great. I mean, it is the closest any female sport has come to punching up against a football roster, which will be huge for us when it comes to Title IX in the future moving forward. Our census is going to probably keep getting more and more female. That means I need more female athletes, so I'm not going to have 65 stunt athletes next year. I don't think Andrea will be like watching this and be like, oh my God, like what? I need 65 in like 12 months? Like, no. Half that number.
Yeah.
Half that number start. But no, it's a lot of fun to watch. And again, it's a low overhead sport in terms of there's not a ton of requirement investment in
facility. Need pads and helmets and all that. Yeah. And travel's pretty competitive. Is pretty good too. I mean, it's not one. I mean, I'll continue to get a lot of questions about field hockey. Love our field hockey alums. And I'll keep an eye on it in the future, but there were a lot of logistical question marks and issues that in the short term made it a little too challenging. A couple more minutes here with AD Adam Tschuor. We talked about the additions of the new sports. There's also been new additions in terms of this. Well, we know of one with men's soccer, and Andres Ochoa.
Yeah, do you know Andres at all?
I remember when he was on those Ryan Jordan teams. I know the name. I've never met him, but I've only heard great things.
Oh my gosh, he is a ball of energy, that one. And so yeah, we're excited to have him, the direction of the program. And again, it's just when I look back, it's not an old program. I mean, it is in the way of like we had it, and then we dropped the sport in our Big West years. We brought it back to get in line with WCC in 2013, but there's a big gap in between there. And so actually our alumni days are really strange
Oh, I can only imagine. Like from back
Spectrum.
in the day.
Very young
Yep,
and
there's
much,
no
much
between.
older. So, and for us to start a program like that in 2013, and Ryan was our first coach, and then pretty much by 2016 we're an NCAA tournament team, 17, 16, 17, 18. And we won. We didn't win a WCC title. We got it in as at-larges each of those years. And it just speaks to the quality of soccer in our league. And he was a part of every one of those teams, twice as a player and then once as an assistant. And then he followed Ryan to UCLA in the NCAA tournament every year. And he was there, including this year, where they actually probably struggled the most in this year compared to any of their other years at UCLA. Well, guess what? How they ended their year? They went on a tear and then won the Big Ten tournament. And
look, there's no greater testament to what Ryan Jordan did here than the fact that he took a program literally from nothing. I mean, you talked about how it had been years since the program had existed, and immediately it was competitive, and it was one of the greatest stories ever, I think, in the history of this athletic department, what Ryan Jordan was able to do. And they had a top draft pick in the MLS draft. Tristan Blackman, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, it's and all those guys have kind of come back out of the woodwork and want to be involved. And, it's
that's cool.
I'm really excited. So Tristan, if you're watching, I know you got bigger, more pressing national team matters and all that stuff, but much like Alex Obert and water polo, we could use it at GM for our soccer program. So
I love that.
But no, it's he's just and again, I think it's just one of those things where we weren't in a horrible state as this year was really tough, but competitively, but we just weren't. We were just kind of treading water. And it was kind of like that with our women's volleyball program too, where it needs a shot in the arm. And boy, if you're looking to define, Andreas, shot in the arm is probably a good way, because
unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, just the fact that he has roots here.
Yeah.
It's an easy sell for everybody.
And he speaks so eloquently about his time and his love for the place and his experience that he had here. And it's just like you listen to him tell you that, and then you just imagine yourself hearing that as a recruit, and you're just like, okay, what kid would this guy talk to that wouldn't want to come here?
Well, I feel like you mentioned water polo. I feel like anyone that played water polo here is going to be of the same mindset, with James, and he's obviously now, I think, that the dean of coaches here. I mean, he's been here the longest of any head coach.
Yeah.
But they win the WCC again, and water polo U is always there, isn't it?
I'm waiting for us to crack through, and I've joked with James about it because obviously I have a tremendous amount of respect for James, and we've had the WCC. Water polo's only been a sport for WCC on the men's side for 2 years, and we're regular season champ. We're the only regular season champ the WCC's had in that sport. Tournament's been a bit of a wall for us, a barrier for us. So all of our great history in the NCAA tournament, I had not been able to experience that yet. So hopeful but honestly, this was supposed to be a rebuild.
I was going to say, this was not going to be
supposed to be
James identifies the years where
yes,
we have the best chance, and this was not one of those
calls
years.
Them, go years. This was not his go year. But I think he rankled a bit at, the way things worked out last year, losing to Cal Baptist in the tournament, and kind of, ending our efforts there. We had some schools that worked against us scheduling wise, that they, again, that the Big Four are hard enough to push up against in water polo when they start colluding with each other to not schedule you.
Yeah.
To harm your strength of schedule, to make
it
impossible.
Great talking to James about that, by the way, and how fired up he gets.
Yeah, and so it's just like, it's bad for the sport. We talked to USA Water Polo folks and other people in the NCAA, like, this is not good healthy for the sport for that. I mean, guess what? When we're not in the go year, guess who's back on our schedule all of a sudden? The Big Four. So it kind of stinks in that way. But it's that is the program that all of our others try to emulate. And for good reason.
Mm-hmm. Lastly, I want to end with this. This is a unique format we're doing here, and I don't think this is going to be kind of weird, because I'm going to go back 30 years, right?
Okay.
And I don't think any AD has properly addressed what happened 30 years ago here with football. And I bring this up because I feel like...
I was 12, so bear with me when I...
Pacific football, undefeated since 1995. We hear you, football people. But, I've learned a lot over the years about our past football program. Very storied history. Football was kind of taken away in the dead of night from a lot of people who care deeply about football here. There's a great football culture going all the way back to Amos Alonzo Stagg. And I think for those 30 years, Pacific has struggled trying to recoup a lot of those people to support the programs as they are here, because a lot of people were, they were pissed off about football leaving the way it did. How can you, and they're still being haunted by these ghosts, how can you best kind of reconcile Pacific's history of football, the people who still wish it existed, and sell them on your vision now, even though we're 30 years removed from this thing happening?
Yeah.
The echoes still remain. Like, how do you reconcile those for the people that were football people in Pacific?
Yeah, and it's always really tough. And it's funny.
Not to interrupt you, but we brought up like how
no,
much it would cost. Like, I mean, and this, we've talked to people about this, but we've talked about a lot of different sports. Football's not coming back, and I feel like it needs to be addressed by an AD here.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you talk to President Callahan, there's a number. Endowment wise, it's a large number. It's a 9-figure number. But hey, it's don't say never, but no, it's it's just, and I think it's more. I think the biggest villain I think in this world is the monetization and the proliferation of the arms race of college sports in general. But in football, it got so insane that our alums from our football program are not alone. There's been a lot of great football programs that have been left by the wayside, unfortunately, just because, again, the dynamics of the expense of the sport have taken off so sharply. It became impossible, especially for private institutions with high tuition costs, to keep up and to compete. And for us, I think, since I've got here 2.5 years ago, I've had a lot of great interaction with some of our football alums, including a lot that hadn't had much to do with us since the program was cut. And I think what we've had a lot of success with is, time heals all wounds, so that's certainly part of it, but is, getting them focused on Pacific and the Pacific Tigers as a whole. Like, I don't care what sport you play. If you were a football player, a volleyball player, a golfer, a basketball player, baseball player, softball player, whatever, they're all Pacific Tigers.
Yep.
And they're all worth supporting in their own way. And a lot of our football alums have found a lot of, I want to say solace in kind of the, again, it's, I think, again, you deal with this all the time. I talked about this earlier. The underappreciation that sometimes people at universities have for how important a sport is. For that athlete. And it
men's
is
volleyball thing we talked about.
It's a huge part of it. Like my experience as a golfer, it was huge. I mean, if they cut, I've been on campus at Creighton maybe 3 times in the last decade. So always be a home for me, but I'm not that engaged with it anymore. My priorities are Pacific right now, right? But if they cut that program, it'd devastate me. I'd be crushed if they did that because I have that much of a respect for the experience that I had. But I'll always be a Blue Jay, and I'll always support all the programs, I'm starting to see that with some of our football alums. Not all, still some. There's so many more to win back, but I think a good, around Chester Caddis and our late '70s teams. We had a football alumni reunion at homecoming this past year, and we had like 65 alums come back for it.
That's cool.
Many of them is the first time they've been back in decades since the program was cut, or even before then. And you know what? That program, they have a scholarship around Coach that many of them support. And the recipient of that, Amanda Bricker, a softball player.
That's cool.
And you know what?
Those are the things.
Yeah, and they're just as proud of her as they would be if that person was a football player. And they still follow her and, kind of geek out over her accomplishments and everything that she does. And so, yeah, I mean, regardless of the sport, we're all Tigers, and we're all going to be there to support each other. And we're really starting to win back some of those hearts and minds. And, it's, I tell people, if you go into our golf facility, Pete and Glenda Carroll, like they were part of the group that helped build that thing. And, who would think that a volleyball player and a football player from Pacific's past would have any interest in supporting the building of a golf facility. But you know what?
We are.
They love the Tigers.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to sell.
A lot of people love the Tigers, and I think the Tigers in a lot of different fronts moving in the right direction thanks to this guy.
Oh, man.
Adam,
Appreciate
thank you.
it.
We'll do it again.
It'll be fun.
What's that?
This will be fun.
It'll be really fun. We're going to do it again. So you can submit questions if you have anything you'd like to hear about from the we'll do it again in this format. Roar more with Adam Tschuor.
Gosh, it's going to take me some time to get used to that, but no, I love it.
All right.
I love it.
We'll see y'all next time. Thanks for joining us.